They say a mother's love is a bottomless well, but they never tell you what happens when the people you filled that well for decide to poison the water. I sat there, my hands shaking against the lace tablecloth Henry bought me for our 40th anniversary, looking into the eyes of the 3 humans I brought into this world, and for the first time in 68 years, I didn't recognize them. They weren't my babies anymore. They weren't the children I'd tucked into bed, kissed through scraped knees, and sacrificed my own dreams to feed. They were strangers with cold eyes and clipboards, calculating the value of my life like it was a line item on a budget. I had raised them with every ounce of love in my soul, but as the rain lashed against the windows of our old family home in Savannah, I realized I wasn't prepared for the one thing every mother fears: the day her children stop seeing her as a person and start seeing her as an obstacle. If you're watching this video, please like and subscribe now to support me and motivate me to make more such videos. Do let me know in the comments of where you're watching from. The house was too quiet after Henry died. That was the first thing I noticed. For 45 years, the floorboards had hummed with the rhythm of our lives, the heavy thud of Henry's work boots, the chaotic patter of children's feet, the sizzle of bacon on Sunday mornings. Now, the silence was heavy, like a wet wool blanket. I spent my days tending to the azaleas in the backyard and polishing the mahogany banister until it shone like glass. It was a beautiful house, a grand Victorian with a wraparound porch that had seen generations of laughter and tears. It was my sanctuary. My children, David, Sarah, and Lucas, called often at first. David, the eldest, was a high-powered attorney in Chicago. Sarah was a trauma surgeon in Boston, and Lucas, my youngest, was a struggling artist in Portland. I was proud of them. I had spent decades working double shifts at the library and sewing clothes for neighbors just to ensure they had the best education. I'd gone without new shoes for 5 years, so David could have his prep school tuition. I'd stayed up until dawn helping Sarah study her anatomy charts. I'd been the only one who believed in Lucas's art when his father wanted him to go into business. I thought that meant something. I thought love was a currency that earned you a place at the table when the world turned cold. The change started on a Tuesday in late October. The air was crisp, and the Spanish moss was swaying in the breeze. They all showed up unannounced. At first, my heart leapt with joy. "A surprise visit," I'd exclaimed, wiping my flour-dusted hands on my apron. I'd immediately started planning a roast chicken dinner. But as they walked through the front door, their faces weren't filled with the warmth of a homecoming. They were tight, professional, and shielded. "Mom, we need to talk," David said. He didn't even take off his overcoat. He stood in the foyer, looking at the peeling wallpaper near the ceiling as if it were a personal insult to his status. "Can it wait for dinner?" I asked, my voice small. "I was just about to go to the butcher." "No, Mom," Sarah said, her voice clinical, the same tone she probably used to tell patients they had 6 months to live. "We've had a conference call. We're concerned." Concerned. It's a word children use when they want to take your power away. We sat in the living room. They didn't sit on the couch where we used to watch movies. They sat in the formal chairs, forming a semicircle around me. Lucas wouldn't look me in the eye. He kept staring at a watercolor painting I'd framed for him when he was 10. "This house is too big for you, Mom," David began, laying a manila folder on the coffee table. "The maintenance is astronomical. The taxes in this part of Savannah are skyrocketing, and frankly, your safety is at risk. What if you fall? What if you leave the stove on?" I haven't left the stove on in 40 years, David, I countered, my heart starting to drum against my ribs. And I have the neighbors. Mrs. Gable across the street checks on me every day. Mrs. Gable is 84, Mom, Sarah snapped. She's not a medical professional. We've looked into some options. There's a wonderful assisted living community outside of Atlanta. It's close to where David's firm has a branch. You'd have a suite, activities, and 24-hour care. The word assisted felt like a slap. I looked at Lucas. Lucas, honey, you love this house. You always said you wanted to bring your children here someday. Lucas shifted in his seat, his voice a low mumble. Mom, things change. We all need to be realistic. The money from the sale of this place would set us all up. It would ensure your care for the rest of your life. And there it was. The money. This house, which Henry and I had paid off penny by agonizing penny, was no longer a home to them. It was an asset. It was a windfall. I refused, of course. I told them I wasn't leaving. I told them I was healthy, capable, and that this house was my life. They left that evening looking frustrated, but I thought that was the end of it. I thought I had stood my ground. I was wrong. Over the next month, the concern turned into a campaign. It started with small things. My phone service would suddenly go out, and David would claim he'd upgraded my plan for me, but the new phone was too complicated for me to use. Then a contractor showed up at my door saying my children had hired him to inspect the foundation. He spent 3 hours poking around and then handed me a report claiming the house was structurally unsound and would cost $200,000 to fix. I knew he was lying. I'd had the house inspected 2 years ago when Henry passed. The psychological warfare intensified. Sarah started calling me every night, asking me the same questions over and over, then sighing when I answered, as if she were documenting my memory loss. Mom, I asked you that 5 minutes ago, she'd say. Are you sure you're feeling okay? You seem confused. I wasn't confused. I was being hunted. The breaking point came when I went to the bank to withdraw money for my quarterly property taxes. The teller, a young woman who had known me for years, looked at the screen with a pained expression. I'm sorry, Mrs. Montgomery, she whispered. There's a hold on this account. Your son David has been added as a co-signer with power of attorney for emergency health reasons. He's restricted withdrawals over $500. I felt the blood drain from my face. Power of attorney? I never signed anything. He submitted a document, ma'am. It was notarized. He claimed you were incapacitated. I walked out of that bank into the bright Georgia sun, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly old. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. I drove home, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I needed to find that document. I needed to know how he'd done it. I spent the afternoon tearing through my home office. Henry and I kept everything in a locked oak filing cabinet. I found the key in the back of the spice rack where we'd always hidden it. As I sifted through the folders, birth certificates, the deed to the house, Henry's military honors, I found a hidden compartment at the back. Inside was a folder I hadn't seen before. It wasn't the power of attorney. It was something much worse. It was a series of correspondences between David and a real estate developer. They hadn't just been planning to put me in a home. They had already signed a contingent sale agreement for the property. They were planning to bulldoze the Victorian and build luxury condos. But that wasn't the kicker. The kicker was a letter from Sarah to David, dated 3 months ago. David, we have to move fast. My malpractice insurance is through the roof after the O'Malley case, and Lucas is drowning in debt with those Portland galleries. If we don't get the equity out of the Savannah house by January, I'm going to have to declare bankruptcy. We need to get Mom declared incompetent. I've already spoken to a colleague who will sign the assessment if we can just get her to show some signs of decline. Just keep gaslighting her. She'll break eventually. The words blurred before my eyes. Gaslighting her. She'll break. These were my children. My heart. My soul. I had spent 30 years of my life making sure they never felt the cold, and here they were, trying to freeze me out of my own existence for the sake of a few luxury condos and a malpractice settlement. I didn't cry. I think I was too far gone for tears. Instead, a cold, hard stone formed in the center of my chest. They thought I was a frail old woman they could manipulate. They forgot who raised them. They forgot that I was the one who managed the family budget during the recession while Henry was laid off. They forgot that I was the one who fought the school board when they tried to cut the arts program. They forgot that I was a Montgomery and we don't go down without a fight. I knew I couldn't confront them yet. I needed a plan. I needed to play the role they had written for me. The next time Sarah called to test my memory, I acted a little slower. I let my voice trail off. I let her think she was winning. I can't remember if I ate lunch, Sarah, I whispered into the phone. Everything feels so foggy. I could almost hear the predatory grin in her voice. It's okay, Mom. We're going to take care of everything. We're all coming down this weekend to help you pack some things. We found a lovely place for you to stay, temporarily, while the house gets those foundation repairs. Temporarily, I repeated. That sounds nice. When I hung up, I called a man I hadn't spoken to in 20 years, Arthur Vance. He had been Henry's best friend and a fierce litigator before he retired. He lived out on Tybee Island, spending his days fishing and grumbling about the government. Arthur, I said when he picked up, I need a shark, and I need him to be hungry. Martha, Arthur's voice was gravelly but sharp. What's happened? Is it the kids? I told him everything. I told him about the bank, the contractor, the letters, and the condos. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. They always were greedy little runts, Arthur growled. Except maybe Lucas. But greed is a contagion, Martha. If you want to stop this, you have to hit them where it hurts, their pockets and their reputations. Can you get me those documents? I have them right here, I said. Good. Don't say a word to them. Let them come this weekend. Let them think they've won. I'll be there, but they won't see me coming. The days leading up to that Saturday were the hardest of my life. I had to walk through my home, touching the walls, looking at the photos of my children as babies, and reconcile those images with the monsters they had become. I looked at David's graduation photo. He looked so noble. I looked at Sarah in her white coat. So dedicated. I looked at Lucas with his first sketchbook. So innocent. How does love turn into this? Is it the world? Is it the way we raise them to want more than we had, until more is the only thing they know how to value? Saturday arrived with a torrential downpour. The sky was a bruised purple, and the wind whipped the oak trees until they groaned. It was fitting. The children arrived at noon. They were efficient. They brought boxes. They didn't even ask how I was feeling. They just started moving through the rooms, tagging furniture with colored stickers. Red is for storage. Blue is for the estate sale, David said, slapping a blue sticker on Henry's favorite armchair. Wait, I said, my voice trembling. This time it wasn't an act. That's your father's chair. It's stained and smells like old tobacco, Mom, David said without looking at me. It won't fit in the new suite. I watched as Sarah went into the kitchen and started emptying my china cabinet, the set my grandmother had brought over from England. She was wrapping the plates in newspaper with a frantic, desperate energy. Sarah, honey, why the rush? I asked. We just want you settled before the holidays, Mom, she said, her eyes darting to the door. It's for the best. Lucas was in the corner of the living room, staring at his phone. He looked pale and sickly. He wouldn't look at the boxes, he wouldn't look at me. "Dinner's ready?" I announced. They looked surprised. "Mom, we don't have time for a big meal," David said. "I've spent 3 days making this," I said, my voice suddenly firm. "It's the last meal we'll have in this house as a family. You will sit down." Something in my tone made them pause. Maybe it was a flicker of the mother they used to fear, the woman who could silence a room with a single look. They followed me into the dining room. I had set the table with the best linens. I had cooked a pot roast, mashed potatoes, and green bean casserole, their favorite meal from when they were kids. I poured the wine, a heavy, dark Cabernet. The atmosphere was suffocating. The only sound was the clink of silverware against porcelain and the drum of the rain. "So," David said, trying to break the tension, "we've scheduled the movers for Monday morning. Sarah and I will stay to help you transition to the Atlanta facility. Lucas has to get back for a gallery opening, but he'll visit next month. Is that so?" I took a slow sip of my wine. "And what about the house? What happens to the house on Monday?" David cleared his throat. "We've found a buyer. A quick closing. It's the best way to ensure your long-term care is funded." "A developer," I said. The room went dead silent. David's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "Mom, what are you talking about?" Sarah asked, her voice hitching. "The condos," I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. "The ones you've already signed for. The ones that are going to pay off your malpractice debt, Sarah. And your gambling debts, Lucas. Oh yes, I know about those too. And David, your promotion to senior partner that requires a significant capital buy-in. I assume that's where your cut is going." David slammed his hand on the table. "Who have you been talking to?" "You're confused, Mom. This is exactly what we were worried about. Your paranoia." "I'm not paranoid, David. I'm disappointed." I stood up and walked to the sideboard. I picked up the folder and tossed it onto the center of the table. It landed in the gravy boat, splashing brown sauce across the contingent sale agreement. "I found your letters," I said, "and I found the fake structural report, and I spoke to my bank about the power of attorney you forged." Sarah's face went white. Lucas looked like he was going to vomit. David, ever the lawyer, tried to pivot. "Mom, listen. We were doing this for you. Yes, we have our own struggles, but if this house stays here, it just rots. If we sell it, everyone wins. We can help you and we can get our lives back on track. We're your children. You're supposed to want the best for us." "I did want the best for you," I whispered, the tears finally coming. "I gave you my life. I gave you every dream I ever had. I thought I was raising people who would value family, honor, and the home that built them. Instead, I raised vultures." "You can't stop this," David said, his voice turning ugly. "The power of attorney is already active. The contract is signed. By Monday, you'll be in Atlanta, and this house will be an empty shell. There's nothing you can do. You're an old woman, Mom. You're out of time." I looked at him, my firstborn, the boy I'd held against my chest while the world felt small and safe, and I felt a profound sense of pity. "Actually, David," a new voice said from the doorway, "she's just getting started." Arthur Vance stepped into the dining room, shaking a wet umbrella. He was wearing his best suit, and he looked like the wrath of God. "Arthur?" David gasped. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here as Martha's legal counsel, David," Arthur said, pulling a stack of papers from his briefcase. "And I'm here to serve you with a few things. First, a restraining order that prevents any of you from entering this property or contacting your mother for 30 days. Second, a petition to vacate that power of attorney based on fraud and forgery. We've already spoken to the notary, David. He's a friend of yours, isn't he? He's very nervous. He's already started talking." David's confidence evaporated. He looked at the papers as if they were snakes. "And third," Arthur continued, leaning over the table, "we've filed a report with the state medical board regarding Sarah's attempt to falsify a psychiatric evaluation for the purpose of financial gain. And Lucas, we've notified your creditors that the inheritance you promised them as collateral doesn't exist, because Martha has made a change to her will." The silence that followed was so profound, I could hear the clock ticking in the hallway. "What change?" Sarah whispered. I looked at my children. My beautiful, broken children. I've spent my life giving to you, I said, and clearly it wasn't the right kind of giving. It made you soft. It made you entitled. It made you think that love is something you can harvest like a crop. So, I'm done giving. This house, the land, and every penny Henry and I saved is being moved into a private foundation. It will provide scholarships for children of single mothers who want to study law, medicine, and art. People who actually want to build something, not tear it down. You're disinheriting us? Lucas cried, his voice breaking. Mom, you can't. I'll lose everything. You already lost everything, Lucas, I said. You lost me. Get out, I said, my voice gaining strength. Take your boxes, take your stickers. Get out of my house. Mom, please. Sarah started, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. Do not mom me. You didn't want a mother. You wanted a bank. Go to Atlanta. Go to Boston. Go to Portland. But don't you ever step foot on this porch again until you can look at me and see a human being, not a paycheck. David tried to bluster, to threaten, to find a legal loophole, but Arthur stood like a stone wall. Eventually, defeated and snarling, they gathered their things. I watched from the window as they ran through the rain to their expensive cars likely paid for with the very greed that had led them here. I watched their taillights disappear down the oak-lined drive. The house was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. The heavy blanket was gone. Arthur stayed for a cup of tea. We sat in the kitchen, the warmth of the stove finally reaching my bones. You okay, Martha? He asked gently. No, I said honestly. I don't think I'll ever be okay again. A piece of me died tonight, but for the first time in years, I can breathe. You did the right thing. They would have destroyed you. I know, but Arthur, where did I go wrong? I raised them with so much love. Arthur sighed, looking into his tea. Sometimes, Martha, we love our children so much we forget to teach them how to love back. We make ourselves so small to make room for them that they start to think we don't exist at all. After Arthur left, I walked through the house. I pulled the blue stickers off the furniture. I straightened the photo of Henry. I went into the dining room and began to clear the table. The roast was cold. The wine was bitter. I went to the front door and stepped out onto the porch. The rain had slowed to a drizzle. The air smelled of wet earth and jasmine. Savannah was beautiful in the dark. I sat in my rocker and looked out at the street. For decades, I had defined myself by who I was to them. David's mother, Sarah's mother, Lucas's mother, Henry's wife. I wasn't any of those things anymore, not in the way I used to be. I was Martha Montgomery. I was 68 years old. I had a beautiful home, a sharp mind, and a heart that, while scarred, was still beating. I had a foundation to build. I had scholarships to award. I had a life that didn't belong to anyone but me. The betrayal had been a knife, but I had used it to cut the strings that were pulling me down. I wasn't prepared for their cruelty. No, I wasn't prepared for the heartbreak of realizing my children didn't love me back, but I also wasn't prepared for the strength I found in the wreckage. I went back inside and locked the door, not because I was afraid, but because I was finally home. The next morning, the sun rose over the marshes, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. I made myself a pot of coffee and sat on the porch. I watched a young girl walk by with a sketchbook under her arm, pausing to look at the architecture of my house. I smiled at her. "It's a good house," I whispered to the breeze, "and it's going to do a lot of good." My children would eventually call. They would apologize, or they would beg, or they would curse me. I knew that. But their voices wouldn't have power over me anymore. I had learned the hardest lesson of all. You can raise them with love. You can give them the world, but you cannot give them a soul. That they have to find for themselves. And as for me, I'm going to spend the rest of my years enjoying the silence, because for the first time, it doesn't feel lonely. It feels like peace. The legacy of a mother isn't just in the children she leaves behind. It's in the truth she refuses to let die. I thought my story was over when Henry passed, but it turns out it was just the beginning of a brand new chapter. One where I am the hero, not the victim. One where the house is filled with hope again, not for the 3 people who tried to take it, but for the hundreds of children who will now have a chance because I dared to stand my ground. I raised them with love. I wasn't prepared for their betrayal, but I was prepared for my own survival, and that, in the end, is the greatest lesson of all. Thank you for listening to my story. If this resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more stories. What was the best part you liked in this story? Please drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts.